No one in the corridors of power had ever thought of it. But from Ouagadougou, a voice rang out, shattering centuries of silence. Ibrahim Traoré did not just promise reform. He launched 10 daring projects, so deeply rooted in the soil and blood of his people that the foundations of Western domination began to tremble. These were not diplomatic speeches. These were weapons of sovereignty: factories, dams, hospitals, banks, digital fortresses, each a declaration that Burkina Faso would no longer bow. Each stone laid, each wire pulled, was an explosive truth: the chains of dependence could be broken. Not by slogans, but by construction, by vision, by indomitable will. If I told you that these 10 projects were not just development, but a trumpet call, would you believe me? Backhand index pointing right if you believe that sovereignty is the lifeblood of a nation. Like, comment, and subscribe to keep this flame burning. We will no longer live in the shadow of others. Burkina Faso must stand on its own 2 feet. Ibrahim Traoré declared in a speech at the beginning of 2025, before tens of thousands of young people in Ouagadougou. Those words are not slogans. They are immediately followed by actions, from factory construction sites to solar power stations shining brightly at night, from the newly established National Bank of Burkina to the Faso Mayo urban areas rising like a dream. Western media outlets call this an earthquake that challenges the old order. But for the people of Burkina Faso, it is only the beginning of a long journey. And to understand why the West is afraid, we must look directly at the 10 projects that are shaking the continent. In March 2025, as the sun beat down on the red tomato fields of Kaya, Burkina Faso farmers witnessed something they had never seen before. Trucks no longer came to carry tomatoes to be sold cheaply across the border. No longer did they wilt and be thrown away. For the first time, those tomatoes were being transported directly to a modern processing plant, right on the land where they grew. And when the first cans of tomatoes came out, people applauded, not because they had more goods, but because they saw freedom in each product. This was Red Gold, the $8 million factory where the Ibrahim Traoré government turned a perishable crop into a weapon of food sovereignty. At first glance, a tomato processing plant might seem like a mere economic project. But in Burkina Faso, it was revolutionary. For decades, farmers here have grown thousands of tons of tomatoes, but eventually had to sell them at a low price to foreign traders. Only a few months later, those same farmers had to buy imported canned tomatoes from Europe and China, which were 3 times more expensive. Traoré understood, political independence cannot stand if people's stomachs are still hungry and their markets are still controlled by others. He declared, "We will produce what we eat, and eat what we grow. No one has the right to turn the sweat of our farmers into someone else's profit." In just a few months, the Red Gold factory has created more than 150 direct jobs, and thousands of indirect jobs in transportation, packaging, and distribution. But the real impact is not in the numbers. It is in the role reversal, from farmers being forced to pay low prices. They become the subjects in the value chain. The West is not trembling because of tomatoes, but because a small nation has found a formula, turning an agricultural product into a shield against dependence. From the tomato factory, we step out into another, greater construction, where every kilometer of paved road is a declaration of freedom. That is the Bobo, Ivory Coast Highway. A $120 million trade corridor. For years, Burkina Faso has been constrained by its landlocked location. To get its goods to international markets, it has been forced to rely on roads and ports controlled by other countries. At times, even a blockade from outside was enough to strangle Burkina Faso's economy. But now, with the highway connecting the second-largest city of Bobo-Dioulasso to the Ivorian border, Traoré has struck at the Achilles heel of dependence. The road not only made transportation faster and cheaper, but it also opened up a series of communities along the route. Houses, shops, warehouses, and small workshops sprang up. The people called it the Road of Life. The West used to see Burkina Faso as a captive market. But with this new highway, that wall is crumbling. When a nation opens its gates, the map of power is redrawn. Perhaps no image is more moving than the sight of a village plunged into darkness suddenly lit up by a solar power system. Children open their books to study at night. Mothers keep vaccines in the refrigerator. Craftsmen can work overtime. That is the Yilan solar program, bringing light to more than 150 villages. changing the lives of more than 300,000 people. In many Western countries, electricity is just a basic service. But in Burkina Faso, light is a symbol of dignity. Darkness has long been an ally of poverty and oppression. Now, each solar panel erected is like a flag of sovereignty. Traoré understands that energy dependence is an invisible collar that binds Africa. To escape, Burkina Faso must create its own energy. From the sun, from human power, from the will of the whole nation. The West is surprised. A poor country, in the middle of the harsh Sahel, dares to rewrite the definition of access to electricity. But for Traoré, this is not just a technical project. It is a liberation of the soul. It is strange that seemingly small projects make the West afraid. A tomato factory, a road. A few solar panels, what can they change? But the answer lies here. Sovereignty is not an abstract concept, but bread on the table, a road connecting a village to the world. And light on every roof. When the people of Burkina Faso find that they no longer need to import tomatoes from France, when they see that their goods can go to sea without permission, when they can turn on the lights with energy from the Sahel sky, they realize, freedom is not a promise, but a living reality. And that is what makes the West tremble. Not because of the investment figures, but because of a dangerous example for the whole of Africa. If Burkina Faso can do it, why can't Nigeria, Mali, Ghana, or Congo? The first 3 projects were just like 3 seeds sown in the land thirsting for change. But they sprouted so quickly that they shocked the whole world. Red gold turned farmers' tears into pride. One $20 million avenue turned geopolitical chains into lifeblood. Yilan turned darkness into the light of dignity. From here, the story is no longer just about Burkina Faso. It is becoming a wake-up call for all of Africa. Backhand index pointing right if you believe that true power lies in the hands of the people. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. You are part of this journey. They say, when the light rises, the darkness will writhe. When the torch was lit in Ouagadougou. When the Gen Z song echoed on Kwame Nkrumah Avenue, those who were used to the darkness began to feel the danger. It is no coincidence that French, American, and European media channels simultaneously raised their voices. Traoré is playing with fire. Burkina Faso will collapse economically, democracy is buried. The words chosen were not for analysis, but to sow doubt, to shake confidence. They knew, if those 10 projects were successful, not only Burkina Faso, but the whole continent would wake up. And then, their power would evaporate like sea foam. In March 2025, the Foreign Ministry of a Western power sent a warning note: "We are deeply concerned about the economic and military orientation of Burkina Faso. This could lead to serious consequences in international relations." Diplomatic words but with a hint of threat. The people of Ouagadougou know well, concern is just a cover. Behind it is a hand that wants to tighten, to build up embargoes, to cut aid. But this time is different. Traoré is not afraid. In front of tens of thousands of young people, he said, "We have lived for decades on borrowed money, and the price is blood and soul. Enough. If they cut aid, we will plant more. If they embargo, we will produce more. Burkina Faso will not kneel." The response was thunderous: Faso. 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 Each project was started like a battle. The Numbil hydroelectric power plant, engineers and workers worked day and night, under conditions of lacking machinery. A local reporter recalled, they used old, broken trucks, but their eyes were like fire. Faso Mayo project, social housing areas built with local bricks. Many families have a solid roof for the first time, children have their own desks for the first time. Burkina Faso Bank, despite difficulties from international payment systems. Tens of thousands of accounts have been opened after only 3 months. People's trust is the greatest capital. Blood has been shed, work accidents, lack of medicine, calloused hands bleeding on construction sites. But every drop of blood shed is not for loss, but in exchange for the belief, Burkina Faso can live without chains. In Paris and Washington, African studies experts are on television. They repeat the same argument: Traoré is dangerous, Traoré is a dictator, Traoré is delusional. But the paradox is, the more he is smeared, the more iconic he becomes. Gen Z in Dakar, Niamey, Bamako, even Nairobi, have started to paint graffiti on walls: Traoré with a raised fist, accompanied by the words, "Sovereignty now." A Kenyan student shared, "We don't need anyone to teach us democracy. We need someone to show us how to get out of IMF debt." Traoré has done what our politicians dare not. But the most dangerous enemy is not only outside. From the shadows, old networks, which feed on corruption and privilege, are starting to move. In the army, there are officers who still keep secret contacts with the old embassy. In the administrative apparatus, many officials are worried about losing their positions and losing lucrative contracts. On the black markets of Ouagadougou, rumors spread quickly: Traoré is about to be overthrown. In April 2025, an assassination plot was foiled at the international airport. The men carrying guns and explosives confessed they had been promised tens of thousands of euros. Who was behind it? It is not difficult to guess. But at the most dangerous moment, the people became the wall. Tens of thousands of young people volunteered to form a construction protection team, patrolling at night, preventing sabotage. Farmers contributed rice to the workers. Teachers taught free literacy to the children of construction workers. An old man in the village of Zinière told a journalist, "We heard the story of Thomas Sankara from our fathers. Today, we see that look in Traoré's eyes. If the enemy wants to kill him, they will have to step over our dead bodies first." In mid-May 2025, after a series of pressures and threats, Traoré appeared in the national square. He wore a simple military uniform, holding high the Burkina Faso flag in front of the crowd. "We have chosen a path that is not easy. But it is the only path to retain dignity. I would rather die on a free land than live with my head bowed in a slave cage." At that moment, the people burst into tears. No longer a president. No longer a politician, he became a living symbol of aspiration. And from that moment, Burkina Faso could not turn back. If you read these lines, do not think that this is just the story of a small country. This is the story of the entire continent. This is the moment when Africa decides, either to master its destiny, or to accept another 100 years of chains. Backhand index pointing right. Please share, comment, and spread this message. Because if Burkina Faso can stand up, then any nation can stand up. History waits for no one. This moment belongs to us. If the first 4 parts are a picture of faith, of constructions rising, of dreams turning into steel and stone, this part is a drumbeat signaling the forces that will never let Burkina Faso go it alone. Because, the closer it gets to success, the more Ibrahim Traoré's flag dazzles those accustomed to living on the throne of dependence. From Paris, secret committees still meet in darkened rooms. They talk about strategic interests. They discuss Europe's energy security. But it all boils down to one word: uranium. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, the Sahel Triangle is depriving them of the energy that once powered hundreds of French nuclear power plants. Every time Traoré inaugurates a hydroelectric station or signs another energy agreement with Russia, Iran, or even Rwanda, the anger in Paris flares up. Intelligence reports show that dozens of former military advisors, who once operated under the guise of peacekeeping, are still in the region, trying to build rebel groups. They don't need immediate victory, they just need chaos to prove to the world, without France, Africa will collapse. But Traoré is making a joke of that argument. The United States is watching everything. Washington doesn't need to directly touch Burkina Faso, it just needs an indirect battlefield. When American businesses are excluded from infrastructure contracts, when the military base in Niger is forced to withdraw under popular pressure, the American elite understands that a dangerous precedent is being set. A small country dares to say no and survive. The CIA doesn't need to send troops. It sends narratives, stories painted on social media platforms. Fake news spread that Traoré was a dictator, that Burkina Faso's treasury was empty, that the youth of the Sahel would starve forever. But the reality on the ground was different. The Burkina Bank was open, grain from the Kugri region was filling warehouses. Newly built stadiums were filled with cheers. It is precisely this contrast between reality and propaganda that makes the West's psychological campaign so dangerous. It sows doubt in the hearts of young intellectuals. The seeds of division, a weapon more destructive than guns and bullets. Traoré, though powerful, is still just one man in a web of ambition. Some of the old generals have never forgotten the privileges of compare. Some of the new ministers want to turn sovereignty into a personal bargaining chip. And where there is power, there is betrayal. Recent secret reports reveal that a group of mid-level officers have been secretly communicating with the outside world, even discussing alternative solutions if Traoré goes too far. These shadows are not enough to shake the foundations, but they are like cracks in the wall, just waiting for an earthquake to burst. When Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced the launch of an $833 million federal bank, international financial institutions were shaken. The IMF, the World Bank, and even the big capital funds all knew, if this project succeeded, the CFA franc would officially be buried. Immediately, financial counterattacks were launched. Burkina Faso's credit rating was downgraded, European banks tightened credit limits, and a series of timber, cotton, and cashew nut exporters suddenly lost their markets. But what they did not take into account was that the people were used to enduring hardship, and hardship itself made them tighten their ranks around Traoré. Images of Ouagadougou mothers selling their wedding gold to contribute to the National Construction Fund spread like wildfire. A nation willing to sacrifice to preserve freedom, that is something that no economic sanctions can subdue. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso once swore, if one falls, three stand. But that unity is also being tested. In Niamey, some officials are skeptical that the national budget is being poured into joint projects instead of solving internal difficulties. In Bamako, some generals want to return to the negotiating table with France to reduce the pressure of the embargo. Traoré understood that if one link were to falter, the whole alliance would collapse. So he traveled constantly, meeting each person, talking to each community, repeating his oath, "We are either free together, or enslaved in parts." These meetings sometimes took place in the dark, without the media's cameras, but they were the thread that kept the alliance from being torn apart. Burkina Faso's security services had foiled many plots, assassinations, coups, sabotage of infrastructure. But the rapidity of the attacks suggested one thing: the enemy was preparing a decisive blow. Leaked news from a meeting in Abidjan revealed plans for a super blockade, cutting off all flights, freezing all international accounts, spreading fake news about a humanitarian crisis to force a military intervention. This would no longer be a Cold War, but a direct blow to the Traoré government. In that context, the image of Ibrahim Traoré becomes even more strange. People see him standing in the middle of the crowd in Bobo Dioulasso, unarmed, with only a microphone and his voice. "They want us to bow our heads. But we have raised our heads. Once we have raised our heads, there is no turning back." There were nights when he stayed up all night in the presidential palace, where the lights remained on until dawn. He wrote, he scratched, he called Bamako, Niamey, Kigali, all to prepare for the day that he knew would come, the day of decision. This part ends like a scene before a storm. There, the people are united, constructions are rising, but darkness is also creeping into every corner. No one knows when the decisive blow will come, only that history is holding its breath. And it is at that crossroads that Part 6 will reveal the twist, when the enemy does not only come from outside, but from within, where handshakes can turn into stabs in the back. Every building, every project, every shout of sovereignty on the streets of Ouagadougou has surprised the world. But history has never been a bed of roses. Just when Burkina Faso seemed to be breaking through, a cold undercurrent suddenly struck. The first news leaked from within the government. A group of senior officers, who had sworn allegiance to Traoré, secretly received phone calls from European capitals. Promises flowed over the radio waves: money, passports, seats of power, even a safe exit if they agreed to betray. No one expected the specter of betrayal to flash right at the moment when it seemed the most glorious. On August 16, 2025, a secret meeting in Ouagadougou was leaked. Some officers did not show up. Rumors immediately spread: someone was preparing a Plan B, a coup in the dark. The West understood that when Traoré could not be broken by bombs or sanctions, the only way was to stab him in the back, by the very people he had trusted. In the capital, the atmosphere changed. People whispered to each other in the market, "Will we see a repeat of Thomas Sankara?" The question was like a knife piercing painful memories. Traoré himself understood the danger. He knew that it was not the enemy outside the borders that was most frightening, but the betrayal within his own ranks. From the beginning of August, the internal security forces were activated. A series of secret investigations were carried out. Every phone was tapped, every secret bank account was scrutinized, every unusual trip abroad was checked. And then the truth was revealed. At least 7 senior officers had received money from a development aid fund originating in Paris. One of them, who had appeared publicly with Traoré, had quietly signed a commitment to return the army to its traditional orbit, that is, to open the door for France to return. On the night of August 20th, Traoré held an emergency meeting. His voice rang out dryly. This is no longer a matter of personal loyalty. This is a matter of the survival of the fatherland. If one of us falls because of betrayal, the whole nation will be thrown back into chains. A chill ran down the spines of the entire room. Loyal officers clenched their fists. Burkina Faso had entered a new battle, a battle not against uniformed enemies, but against enemies hidden in the shadows. The next morning, Ouagadougou was in turmoil. News of the treasonous plot was announced. Tens of thousands of people poured into the streets, holding high the slogan, "No second Sankara. No more betrayal." The people were not silent. They wanted to send a message directly to the silent mastermind. Burkina Faso was no longer a colony that could be easily divided. However, from Europe to Washington, sensational headlines appeared: political crisis in Burkina Faso, Traoré government shaken. They wanted to create chaos, to sow fear in the hearts of the people. But what they did not understand was, betrayal only made loyalty burn stronger. That twist, betrayal in the dark, did not defeat Traoré. On the contrary, it pushed him and the people of Burkina Faso into a new state, more vigilant, more tough, more determined. They understood that the road to freedom was not only with enemies outside the border, but also with daggers in the dark, within the country. And it was in the darkest places that the light of a nation's will shone brighter than ever. And then, after all the storms, Burkina Faso was no longer a faint name on the map. It had become the flag, the bell, the lightning signaling the dawn of a continent. Ibrahim Traoré, a 30-year-old officer, not only saved a country from its shackles, but also rewrote the biggest question for all of Africa: do we dare to decide our own destiny? Those great projects may still be unfinished, the hidden plots have not ended, but the fire has flared up. A new generation is rising up. They no longer accept the role of dependents, no longer bow their heads. They yearn to own their own land, gold, energy, sky, and even their own dreams. Now, history has opened a new page. And you, the reader, are not just an observer. You are a witness, a part of this battle. Let your voice be heard, share this truth, let the desire for freedom spread like fire in the dark night. Like, comment, subscribe, because Burkina Faso's fight is also our fight.